Point of order, the chair of the academic committee is attending today's meeting remotely. Policy 2:110 assigns the board president the duty to make all board committee appointments. At Chair Akris's request, I will serve as chair pro tem for today's meeting. Call to order. I call to order the December 13th, 2024 academic committee meeting of the Board of Education of Hinsdale Township High School District 86. The meeting is being held in the Hinsdale Central Community Room. The time is 7 a.m. Deb, will you please call roll?
Member Akris.
Don't think she's on there.
Okay. Member Roman.
Here.
Member Greenspan.
Here. Please stand if you are able and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The committee will now hear audience comments. Speakers will have 3 minutes to address the board. As a reminder, our board protocols state board meetings are meetings of the board held in public, not open forum town hall meetings. Board members will not engage the public during public comment. The board will keep this in mind as we conduct our meetings, allowing the public to provide input at the time allotted on the agenda to ensure the multiple voices of the community inform board deliberations. When the board deliberates, it will be a time for the board to listen and learn from each other, taking the public input into consideration, not a time to re-engage with the public. The board will consistently abide by our formal processes relating to the issue so that all persons are treated fairly and equally. Our first speaker is Warren Ali.
Good morning. Happy holidays. Warren Ali, parent of a Hinsdale Central freshman and an incoming 8th grader who is at Westview Hills, friend of the board and candidate for a seat on this board. It's great to be here. I want to acknowledge the great work that's being done regarding getting folks oriented. We're at the 8th grade night this week, and several members here provided good detail and direction on academic choice, club choice, athletic choice in the evening. I'm not sure when they recruit you, if they tell you how many evenings you're going to work, but you work quite a few because I see you everywhere. I think it's a great privilege and certainly a great service to the parents and the students that you provide. So I really appreciate it. This was my second time through. I was less overwhelmed this time than the first time with 90 clubs present. The thing I would encourage you to do, and some data was shared as to impact of choices in the science path, whether it's physics first or chemistry or biology first. I would encourage you to tap into our significant alumni resource to understand post-graduation the impact of those choices. Deal with the outcomes. Help us better understand because we don't know the outcome yet. You do if you tap into that resource. So I would encourage you to do that and keep doing what you're doing. Fantastic. I appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Linda Bark.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. First, I have a confession to make. I didn't understand the time of my son, the music teacher's event this morning. So I will have to leave at 8 after I was so looking forward to this meeting. And I'm so talked it up. But his show comes first. We're actually going to a care home with his school choir. And very cool. But I think it started earlier than I thought. And with that said, he always took 2 music courses at Central. He needed some early bird summer school courses to fit everything in. And he's Exhibit A for multiplying and maximizing choices. And the great idea is to have early bird PE there's never going to be a stampede to early bird PE. It's just a very necessary and important option, because maximizing opportunity should be what we're about, as one district with alignment as more for all, not less. And the fact that we're bringing ASL to Hinsdale Central, I think is a great step in the direction of alignment as more for all. Central has, many parents at Central have hoped this for years, that this could happen. Some kids the learning styles of some kids favor ASL as their choice of a world language. And it's very important that two wrongs don't make a right, and whichever school was missing a class or an opportunity, it needs to be supplied. It doesn't matter which school, because we are one district. And as far as our North Star is concerned, Dr. Locke, it should be education for citizenship, both the values and the fund of knowledge that kids need to be good citizens. And second only to that is maximizing opportunity across the district so that each kid can fulfill his or her best potential and personal dream, which of course won't be the same for every kid. My kids personify that. One music teacher, one cardiologist. Didn't take exactly the same courses in high school. As progress to one district, though, I'm disappointed that we didn't, not to see honors world history in the program of studies for Hinsdale South. There's no polite word for, the concept that there could be no demand at Hinsdale South for this course. As Mr. Ruby and Mr. Glinski have pointed out, there's a full range of student interest and preparation at both high schools. Also, the entire Biology First pathway should be reinstated at Hinsdale South, including AP Physics 1. No major opportunities should be missing from either high school. I'm not sure that the universe being what it is, and you can't be in two places at once, we can ever get to perfection for every student schedule every semester. But we can still make a lot of progress toward one district and alignment as more for all. But mainly, sorry I have to sneak out early, but I will be testing the system for listening to the audio recording and seeing the slides. Because I've been asked about this, because a lot of people are very interested who can't come to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to approve the prior committee meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the November 7, 2024 academic committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Motion.
Good morning.
Good morning. Motion, Member Vermon. I second. Second, Greenspan. Roll call vote.
Member Akris.
Asma, there's a motion to approve the November 7th, 2024 academic meeting minutes. Abid motioned, I seconded, and now we're doing the roll call vote.
I don't know if she's out here.
She's raising her hand.
Oh,
Let me just check here.
why don't you go ahead and continue with the roll call vote?
Yeah.
Deb?
Yep. Member Greenspan.
Aye.
Member Vermon.
Aye.
Motion carries 2-0. The committee will discuss 3 items today. 3.1, overview of the course selection and staffing process. 3.2, review of courses offered and running in school year 24-25. And 3.3, D86, multilingual program overview. Superintendent Locke?
Thank you.
Nice to see everyone here. Committee members, thanks for all your help. Team, I don't know if you heard, but Taylor Swift's Eras Tour concert ended this week. That's the cause for much joy and angst across the globe. It does seem, though, that in the Hinsdale D86 community, there's a movement by certain members of the community to make the academic committee the most popular event performance now that the Eras Tour is over.
Yeah.
So we are going to, we have 3 presentations today. We're going to follow the same sort of structure we've talked about a few times and describe some key aspects of the district's programs and offerings before we analyze. We will analyze before we make predictions and make those predictions before we do evaluation. Most of the work here today will just be descriptive. So we understand, and all of us understand how things work, and we can use that to do that kind of analysis. So please give us the patience to fill in the blank space and give your attention to these tortured poets as they shake it off.
So to chair today, I just want to introduce our 2 assistant principals of instruction from Hinsdale South, Mr. Bottomy, and then here from Hinsdale Central, Dr. Cernzioni. They're going to take it from here. And we also have Jen Ricknier, our director of counseling here at Hinsdale Central. If some questions come up that we can't answer, she is a pro in this area.
Everybody, Jen Ricknier.
Well, good morning, and thank you. As Mr. Ali said, this week actually is really kind of the start at Central for kind of kicking off the heat of course selection and the staffing process here. And we'll explain, it actually began a little while ago, but today we'll kind of give you an overview of the process and the timeline that specifically relates to course selection and staffing. And we'll talk about how the entire purpose of this process is really driven by student voice. However, there are some constraints that as a district we have to follow legally and fiscally, responsibly, space-wise, all of those components. And at the end, the goal is our goal primarily is to maximize that student voice. So before we get into the process, to just kind of set the stage, there are many constraints that we have as a school in the district for the staffing and course selection process. These types of constraints range in a variety of issues. Some are required by school code. For example, there is a deadline that we need to let all certified and non-certified staff know if they are being non-renewed by a certain date. So we have a timeline that we must follow. Other of those components as required by school code are specific types of staffing. For example, Tracy will talk a little bit about multilingual. The offerings that we must have in special education are multilingual, for example. Some are constraints within our physical spaces. There's only one room with pottery wheels, for example. There's only one wood shop in each building, so we can only run one of those classes per period. And then some of them are other constraints that we have that we try to maximize student voice. Things like, class limits so that our classes do not get overcrowded, because we know that class size leads to academic success. So these are some things that we have been working on and agreeing upon through the HR committee, through our agreements with our HHSTA union, as well as the legal requirements that we follow.
Good morning, everybody. This is an ongoing improvement process for us. So every year we're looking to make this process just work better. So for example, last year, because of the Accelerated Placement Act, we worked to kind of redesign the process, including a letter that gets sent home to all families, outlining student performance, and we'll talk about that. This year, we redesigned the program of studies to try and make it more consistent, more readable. We're looking at, we're going to see today the comparison of courses between the 2 buildings, trying to run more longitudinal data so we can have awareness of which courses run, and then some things that we're looking at for the future. So a uniform way to record the course selection process So we have data there. Looking at the PACE framework, which will continue to become an important part of an integral part of this process and student selection. And as part of that, sort of the multi-year planning opportunities for students. So as they begin to look at courses, looking not just at what am I taking next year, but what am I taking in future years.
Just before we continue, I just want to mention to everyone, we will be posting all 3 slide decks later. So some of you are furiously taking notes. Everything you see here will be posted.
They are now posted.
That was very quick, thank you, Deb. So they are currently
Can I ask
posted.
you a question, Kurt?
Yeah.
Can you go back?
Yep.
You got it.
The, record course selections at both buildings, that's first choice, second choice, third choice, like every iteration of a student's course selection will be recorded?
Correct, yeah, we're looking at that process of, when we get students making selections, but then, as we go through the process of which courses are going to run, and courses get chosen to not run, how does that process, the iterations of that process?
Yeah.
And even more specifically, like, we have moved our whole system, as almost every district has, to a technology-based process to do this. However, not so long ago, course selections were recorded on paper or on individual Excel documents with maybe different deadlines and things. It makes pulling consistent data difficult because things aren't the same. So we want to better be able to analyze, what were the course requests, and then as the scheduling process goes through that Kurt and Chris will talk about, how does that get embodied into the ultimate schedules that students have.
So the course selections are actually recorded by the guidance counselors, though, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what system is that?
Through Infinite Campus.
Infinite Campus,
Yeah.
okay.
So this next slide gives you a kind of a broad overview of the timeline, starting with the program of studies approval in November, following along through student appointments with their school counselors, all the way down to the release of schedules towards the middle to the end of the summer year, our summer. So we've got a slide essentially for each step in the process, so we'll walk you through how it all works. So it begins with the program of studies in November. So staff works to create that program of studies. The Board of Ed reviews that and approves that program of studies, and that really allows the process to begin. We provide that to our families so that they can begin to make their decisions about their available options and the programs that they want to study. Then in December, the administrative staff put together the master timeline to make sure that we know, as Chris mentioned, there's constraints we need to follow, so making sure that we follow through with the important dates and that all of that is laid out. And then the teachers use the program studies and department chairs and so on to create resources that are just going to help with the process. So for example, making sure that students are aware of the electives that are available. When we have new course offerings like AP Pre-Calculus or American Sign Language, making sure that families are aware. Nothing is intended to supplant the program of studies, but more just provide information so that we make sure that students and families have all the information they need to make the best choices for themselves. In early December, teachers take time out of their classes to actually have individual conversations with students about how they're doing in that course, what their recommendation is going to be for future years. And then by mid-December, in fact, it's the end of this week right now, teachers put in those course recommendations for students.
When do the 8th grade recommendations come in? Or the incoming 9th grade?
The incoming 9th grade, that's November into December. So for example, at Hinsdale South, we just met all the core department chairs, as well as myself and Mike Holland, the director of counseling. We met to review those just last week.
Okay. So around the same time?
Around the same time. This is, as I mentioned, one of the new pieces in our process is that we send a letter home in late December that goes to students and families, that includes their current courses, their current grades, has their teacher recommendations listed there, and then as part of the Accelerated Placement Act, has their standardized test performance, and then what those benchmarks are for moving into an accelerated course. So families have a chance then to review those recommendations, have some conversations essentially before the student meets with their school counselor. The next step is our 8th grade night. So Central just had theirs this past week. South is going to have theirs in early January, and this is an opportunity for students and families to learn about the available programs, learn about activities, get just information about courses and levels, and ask questions, and really just provide, again, as much information as we can to our students and our families so that they can make the best decisions about course offerings.
At that point, then students will have the opportunity to complete individual counseling appointments with their counselor. Those appointments range and start from next week if they are an incoming freshman all the way through the end of January. And at those individual appointments, they're somewhat short. They're about 10 to 15 minutes because we are meeting with every student. But we're really looking to do a couple main things. First is identify all of the courses in which a student is taking next year. Primarily the electives and identifying an alternative elective if space does not allow for the primary or secondary elective choice to fit into the schedule. But also talk about appropriate levels. So not only is a student taking English 2, for example, but is English 2 or English 2 honors the correct choice. And holistically, what is an appropriate amount of rigor or honors that we have here? So our counselors do a wonderful job of really meeting with students, answering families' questions during that time from the individual appointment. And then it does allow for some changes all the way through the end of January before we close. And we do have a hard deadline at the beginning of February this year, thank you. Because what we do is we really build our master schedule completely off student choice, essentially, or we seek to maximize student choice here. And the way that we do that is once all students have met with their counselor, from incoming freshmen all the way up through the rising seniors, is we really look to tally, we call them simple tallies, or the total number of requests for each section and each course. And from that really then begins the sectioning side, or kind of behind the scenes work that us as school administrators do. That work requires what we call simple tallies, is really working with our department chairs to determine if there are 64 students in a course, for example, how many sections does 64 necessitate? Once we begin to have an idea at the building level, we then collaborate with our sister building as well as district administrators to determine the optimal number of sections based on the total FTE in the district. And the whole purpose of this process is to create the formal sectioning and staffing plan. So taking into account if 64 students is, how many sections is that? Because there are a certain number of constraints in an art class versus science versus non-science class. Do we have appropriate staffing? Do we need to begin thinking long-term about that? Our goal, like I mentioned, is to maximize student schedule. At Central, because we have more flexibility with the number of students, we scheduled about 89% of the total requests we were able to grant last year. South has some additional constraints due to the number of singletons and doubletons that exist. They were able to schedule about 68% of the total requests that students earned. After we create the staffing plan and we know, for example, how many sections of English 2 do we need? We need 13 sections of English 2 and 7 sections of English 2 honors. We then work to create the total number of FTE in the building and by department then. That allows us to work with the department chairs to see if there's different hiring needs that may come up. So at this time, we're working across the district to see if we need to think about increasing or decreasing part-time teachers. We need to think about traveling teachers, if we need to fill retirements, if we need to post positions. We're starting to think about those needs that we have filled already and the ones that we don't have filled. That's where we work in collaboration with the district office and HR in particular to put together our annual staffing proposal for the HR committee to review before it goes on to the Board of Ed for first and second read.
Can I ask a really quick question? South is having their meetings with the kids in January.
The
Like
incoming freshmen,
freshmen.
correct.
Is that kind of late, considering the time frame in terms of determining, you know, the number of requests and then deciding how many sections they're gonna have to run?
You talk about
And
when is the
FTE.
last grade request courses.
For sure. This year, our request is February 6th is the last day. So doing it, they do it, you guys are doing it the week right after winter, correct? Correct. Correct.
9th, I think, yeah.
Good.
Central used to have ours in January as well. It's just, sometimes it's the flexibility of when you can do it, but within this time, the first couple weeks before or after winter break, it gives us enough such time to work through the process.
I'm asking, more thinking, framing it from the family's perspective. If you're not gonna run sections or courses aren't gonna run, then you have to get back to the families, right? And then the students have to choose other courses. Is that enough time? What, I'm sorry?
What's that?
I'm wondering if what you're asking is later on in the slide
Okay.
deck in terms of when, yeah.
Okay.
I think we could address that later
Okay.
on, 'cause
That's
It's a
summer
good question though,
Yeah.
to think about the whole time.
Yeah.
I think, Member Akris might have, Member Akris, did you have a question?
Asma, 1 second, we cannot hear
We're
you.
trying to adjust the volume, 1 second.
Maybe it's her.
I've been to too many Taylor Swift concerts, my ears are shut.
Yeah, we know.
Continue. I don't want to hold
Oh,
on.
there you are,
Oh, we're
Asma.
good, we can hear you now.
All right. Hallelujah. It's the most frustrating thing not to be heard. I apologize. Thank you for, I just wanted to ask quickly, and I appreciate the accommodation, calling you remotely due to work. Dr. Cirincione, you talked about the percentage of the Hinsdale Central students. You said 89% of the student population usually gets the scheduling. Is that, did I hear that accurately?
89 of the total requests made, so not by student, but if we tally up all of the requests, students usually make about 7 requests per student. So if we add up all of the requests, 89% of the requests we were able to grant at Central.
Okay. And you mentioned South had the challenges, but you didn't have the percentage. I didn't hear the percentage. Is the percentage calculated for
Sorry,
South?
yes, they were at 68% for this current school year.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes, 68%, 68.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So after this, and once our proposal goes to the board for approval, this then allows us to complete the work of the master schedule. So once we, at the building and district level, are given the approval to, for example, work with 201 FTE in the building, for example, that allows us to specifically, at the building level, work with our department chairs to begin the actual scheduling of the courses. And so the first thing that we do is place singletons and doubletons, because that's the hardest part to do. So Infinite Campus actually helps us through that system. They have part of the system that helps maximize it. So when you place a singleton, it tells you the ideal place based on the students in that course to reduce conflicts among all other courses in the system. So that's when the assistant principals of instruction would work with the directors of counseling in particular to place all of the singletons and doubletons. Once we do that, we give that matrix to our department chairs to really work and build the rest of their department schedule. After they place the department schedule, that's where they're placing the 12 English 2 classes, the teachers, the rooms here. From that point then, that's where we're able to kind of do 2 things. First is, once we know that a class isn't running early on due to low enrollment, at the beginning of this process, around the same time of singletons and doubletons, we are able to go back to the students and let them know that a specific class isn't running and to identify an alternative to that class. Later on, when we actually run the master schedule and everything's put there, there are other sets of conflicts that come in. So even though a class is running, a student may have primarily a singleton conflict where they're in, it doesn't fit the 2 singletons run at the same time. While the system said it was the optimal placement for those courses, it's not optimal for every student. And that's when our counselors would then work with those students to identify and tell them the options that they have and identify some alternatives from there. That portion really is running throughout March to get us ready to run a final conflict report, we call it, by April. Ideally, by mid-April, we want to have everything placed so we can run one final report to see what other conflicts exist, so that we have a full schedule for every student. And that's when we're looking at that final percentage number of trying to schedule at the highest efficiency that we can. And so that's when Jen and I were working last year. We're placing everything, we're getting to students. Our goal is by the end of April that we have run the master schedule, we have run the final conflict report, we have met with all of the students that may appear on that conflict report for one reason or another, because once we do that, in May, we will send out a list of all of the courses that students were scheduled in. It's not their schedule, it doesn't tell them the period, but this lets them know a confirmation of the courses that they were enrolled in. We open up a change deadline then. At Central, it's mid to late May. In South, it's early June. For students to request a schedule change if a space allows. So for example, this is happening many months earlier in January. If a student thought, for example, they wanted to take graphic design and their interest changed over, this is a long process, 5 months. If there's a seat, for example, in orchestra, we could change that elective for them as an example. After that window closes, then we don't make any changes unless there's a few criteria that may have occurred with a final semester grade or summer school and admittance to college here. That really allows us in the summer to get the schedules ready to send out, which happen in the summer. That's when we officially send out student schedules with the order, the teacher, the room number, etc. That gets us ready for the start of the school year then. There we go. And so what we have been working on this year is Kurt's in his first year, I'm in my second year here, is that this is a long process here, but we are continually making improvements from that process, from trying to make the process, which is very long, it can be confusing, especially if this is your first time through, to make it easier for families, to maximize student choice, and to make sure that we're trying to provide as equal and best opportunities as we can for students at each building.
Great. Thank you both. Questions from the board at this time?
How were the students reminded of the change course deadline? Because, you know, sometimes they forget everything.
What? Teenagers we're talking about?
There's a couple of ways. So the main way is that we send out the email of the courses itself. At Central, I know that we put that information in our e-blast to families so that families get it as well. It's in our announcements.
It goes out 3 times,
Okay.
or 7 times, yeah, the email with what courses, and then the link to if they wanna request a change.
Would we
I
put
think
it in the
last-
South Blast?
Yeah, same.
Okay,
Similar
okay, that's-
process,
Yeah,
yep.
that's helpful.
Yeah. I think last year, at least at Central, we had over 800 schedule change
Oh, boy.
requests that then we have to process individually.
Thank you.
So it's you see some of the differences, and while there's maybe slight differences in the timeline, you know, typically that release of schedule is a little bit earlier here at Central, but they tend to have a little bit more work after that. And then South has a little bit more work on the front end with a higher number of conflicts at the beginning, maybe a little less after that, because they've had more recent conversations with a lot of their students in that initial process. So just slight differences based on the practices and how the outcomes work.
In terms of the June and July, Jen, and actually Mike's not here. With regards to the guidance counseling office and summer hours, because I know that at Central it's hard for you guys, because as you said, you had 800 change requests, and the guidance office is not open all summer like regular 8 to 3. Is there a streamlined form or something that you know? So in the past, we've heard that parents had a hard time communicating or were unable to get a response. I don't know. But is there a specific form, like a Google form that can be designed that will
Yeah,
go straight?
that's what they fill out. They
Is
fill
it?
out a Google form now with their requests. The deadline has always been, it's usually a 2-week window, maybe a little bit more. And then that is typically in the middle of May, which then gives counselors time before the kids leave to try to meet with them. Meeting with 800 kids is hard,
Yeah.
but we do our best. And in most cases, the counselors are able to make contact with all of their kids. And then there's no more additional changes after that point. So, you know, in the summer, the counselor hours is should be more about meeting with new students. Sometimes we're doing some college things for kids. But, so outside of that window, there's only a few opportunities to make a change beyond that May window request. And then, we would, if they reach out in the summer, then we would work through those. But there aren't very many of them because it's typically a student failed a class, which a lot of those are addressed before kids leave for the summer. The students took a summer class that impacts what they're enrolled in the fall, or if it's a senior and they need it for college admissions. Those are really our only caveats that will make changes after that May window.
So there's a Google form in May.
Yep.
Guidance tries to meet with all their kids before the end of the school year.
Yep.
And
So-
there's not really a lot of changes in June or July.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Member Akris, did you have any other questions about
I
this?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to just, thank you for the presentation. This is extremely helpful. I think it helps us and community members to get a better understanding of how all of this is streamlined. I know there's a lot of different moving parts. And I also appreciate the fact that we try to, as much as we can, accommodate our students' needs and their requests, and that there is opportunity to even change if need be. I do want to encourage us again to think about Hinsdale South student community members, increasing that 68% to as much as we can to support. And I recognize some of the challenges. But thank you for the report, very helpful.
Great.
One thing I'd like to add too, because I know this is a question that we often get a lot, is to fully be able to report the number of students that get their total requests from the first, second, third electives on certain times. The one difficult part is we are working together to streamline dates that we capture that data, like Dr. Lott said, at specific points. But the data changes so frequently. For example, the data could change 10 times in one day, especially at the end of the process where we think we have an idea and then we've identified one class period that we need to move from a second to a third, just one course in the entire thing. That could change any number of 30 people's schedule. As you're moving one class, all of a sudden that one class changes potentially the electives, not only of the kids in that, but the other open seats, and that changes the whole thing. So I think that's one thing to kind of demystify around the process, is it's really hard to capture things if we're not at the same point. And so we will work this year to really capture at specific points of what it looks like, but it's not always possible to get every iteration of an elective change because those changes happen so much, and the system does a lot of it, working to maximize choice.
That's a good point. Good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you all. Do you want to go to the next agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah.
Ready to go. All right, so for now, and this is very much connected to the previous presentation, we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the overall process. And then what we wanted to do was basically present the data and the actual courses that are running this school year. So we are not going to go over each individual course. We would be here much longer than our typically scheduled time. But we want to kind of talk about how this presentation is laid out, how the information is laid out, and go through maybe 3 example departments, and then certainly any other departments the board wishes to look at a little bit closer. We can take the time to do so now, and we can always follow up at different points. So just as a big picture overview here, what we're looking at, again, these are department by department, the courses that are that were offered for this school year that we're currently in, the 24-25 school year, and then also course by course, department by department, which courses are running at each campus. And we want to make sure that we kind of support this with the understanding that we believe all students should have a robust menu of courses available to them. And you're going to see it's pretty impressive. The amount of courses that we have available to us, as we all know, across the district. We're certainly lucky to serve the district, and our students are lucky to attend it. And we continue to spend a lot of time, as we have over the years, to really evaluate any of those differences that still exist. And we know we still have a few spaces where we don't have complete alignment in offerings, but really it's pretty minimized at this point. But we'll certainly highlight those as part of this presentation. What we did not include here, we did not include multilingual courses, which is actually our third presentation today, and special education courses. And the reason being, there's lots of rotational offerings. You know, those courses for a lot of different reasons may not run every year. It just would really, it'd be pretty confusing to go over all of that and include that. So it's definitely not to not attend to that or as important topics, but they're really best dealt with a bit separately than the overall general education offerings that we have. So again, we went through several iterations of this to get to this final product. Hopefully it's pretty straightforward. We did want to talk about some of the trends that we've noted as we've continued to analyze this. And some of these are pretty obvious, I think, but there's certainly, as we've mentioned, a wide variety of courses available to students throughout our district. In the core disciplines, English, math, and science, we have almost identical offerings across those core disciplines. Music offerings, as a lot of people are aware of, we see those courses running more extensively at South. And we'll see that. And if you want-
Central.
Oh, excuse me, I apologize. I was thinking of what I was going to say about South. At Central. And we know one of the primary reasons is, which is typical in a music program, is some of the partner districts that serve our high schools that our students come from have different opportunities across the district. So certainly that's part of it, particularly with the orchestra program. We also know that we have a specific research opportunity that's a sequence of courses that can be taken together, or AP Seminar can be taken individually. With AP Research and AP Seminar, that has been traditionally housed here at Central. So that's something we can certainly still explore in the future at South. And then there's a few courses in the program of study that aren't running at one campus or the other, but it's a pretty minimal number overall.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course,
Go
yeah.
back to the other one.
Please.
So core disciplines, the course offerings are pretty similar at both campuses.
In English, math, and science, social studies we
Yeah.
know, and we'll look at that one
That's-
specifically. That we have some
Yeah.
differences there.
With regards to electives, and I know you said we weren't gonna talk about electives,
We
but
can.
world languages,
Mm-hmm.
it's an elective, but it's not an elective, right? So
Sure.
the state
Yeah.
requires,
in here.
it's in here?
We got that,
Okay.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah.
have ML and special ed.
Okay.
We have all the others.
So we can use world languages as one of our examples. We'll look at that one, because
Perfect.
that's a good one to look at. Yep.
Yeah.
So maybe let's just start with one that's at the beginning here, just so you understand the layout, and I'll kind of explain it and what information we have that's common. So for art, for instance, at the top bullet, we'll just list either the number of courses district-wide, or we always will list that. If there's a difference, we'll state that right in the top bullet between the campuses. And then we'll have a bullet for each South and Central to see the percentage of those offerings that are running. So for instance, you can see all of the courses offered in art at South are running at South, all but one are running at Central. And then on the next two slides, and this is for this school year, what you'll see is just a simple grid. And I have to credit Dr. Cirincione here for the nice colorful grid that he used, so it's very easy to see. So clearly the green check marks, we have a column for each of what's offered, and then a column for each which is what is running. And clearly that red symbol is when something is not running. So you can see here, and for many of these we have more than one slide, so you have to kind of page through as you look at this on your own if you choose to. So you can see almost all of these courses are running across the district. So that's just an example for art. We can look at world languages, and then how about we look at social studies, and then if
Great.
there's other specific questions, so sorry, I'm just gonna speed through these to get to world languages here.
But these are all posted for people. They're
Yeah,
already
everything's posted, I think, Deb,
Everyone
right?
can
It's
look at
already
it, yeah.
posted, so you
Okay.
can go through the PDF, this complete slide deck. So here's world languages, as was requested. So you can see here, and this is, so 36 courses district-wide, that's the total number, although there's some differences between which is offered at Central and South, as we know. It's coming a little bit more aligned here next year, or quite a bit more. This year, 29 out of the 36 are running at South. And we can look at some of the specific examples. And all of the 34 offerings at Central are currently running. The exception here, and this one I know gets confusing, is our Latin courses. We have some courses that rotate every other year. So every course that was offered this year at Central is running. That would not include the Latin courses that rotate every other year. So again, we can look at this, for example, and this is how we indicated, we kind of went back and forth, and this is the best way to do it, but just so we're clear, ASL, for instance, we use that as offered at Central, so you see the green check mark, but we did indicate the students have to travel if they chose to take it this year. So So we kind of, tried to represent both of those. It's an opportunity, but we wanted to make sure and indicate that you'd have to travel if you want to take advantage of that, which we have, I think, 14 or so students. Or it's actually a
Yeah,
little bit more than that, I
right
think.
around 14.
Maybe about 14 students this year doing that.
Doing what?
Traveling to South for ASL. So again, you can see as you go down, an example of a course that's not running at one campus or the other. So, right, French 4 honors and French 5 honors, just a little bit different opportunities at each campus currently that we have, where French 5 honors is not offered at Central, French 4 honors is not offered at South. Those have just been some historical differences. Etymology is a class that's offered at both, but we know has not run at South typically. It's had a tradition of running and having course requests here at Central. It is not at South.
So French 4 honors and French 5 honors, the reason they're not offered at either Central or South is,
Historical.
Yeah.
Prior to alignment, they had the different offerings here. As we have worked through the process, those are some of the things that our department chairs have been working, and that course in particular is slated in this next school year to begin to offer a similar course between both campuses.
okay.
And that some of the conversation is how that happens because of the upper levels and what makes sense, whether it's offering the course at both courses, is it a combined curriculum? That's something that our French teachers need to examine and are working through.
Yeah,
And, go ahead.
go
Chris.
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think Chris was referring to this, but there was a couple of updates in the program of studies about our world language programs, in addition to the ASL German decision, that we can kind of point out as well, French.
Can you go to the next slide? 'Cause
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Spanish
The
is a great
Spanish, yeah.
example of that.
It's actually
One
this
over from
Yep.
there. So a great example to highlight that traditionally at Central, we've offered 2 Spanish 5 honors classes, Latin American Studies and Spanish Studies. We didn't offer Spanish 5 honors. South offered Spanish 5 honors, but not the other 2 that we have. So in the program of studies this year, we dropped the Spanish Studies, but really the Spanish 5 honors and Latin American Studies are very similar in their curriculums that have always existed. So over this next year, our department chairs have already started to work on, really, the curriculum will become similar in terms of, because it already is similar, it's essentially a difference of naming conventions that have existed here. But that's some of the cleanup that we continually do to make that offering similar or the same at both campuses.
So that's part of the constant curricular
Absolutely
improvement
correct.
that you go through by department?
Yep.
Correct.
Yep, each department's kind of on their own schedule. World languages is one of the more complicated ones because they have so many preps or different versions and different levels of each course, and particularly at South, but even at Central in some of the languages, we don't have many teachers, right? So some of our teachers teach all 4 or even 5 levels sometimes, and rotating through, so that's a lot of alignment work to do when you don't have large groups of teachers working on it. So sometimes that takes a little bit longer in our elective departments
And I
to get
think
through all those courses.
Another great example is in world language, they've done a great job. They started at the kind of 2 points years ago. They started to make sure that AP was aligned with the College Board curriculum rewrites about 5 years ago. But then they have started work with level 1 and worked their way up each year to make sure that the skills developed in level 1 coordinate to 2, 3, 4. And so now they're at the point next year that they'll be at level 5 to having gone through 1, 2, 3 in the previous years. They're working on 4 this year, and then 5 is up for this continual alignment and revision to make sure that curriculum is relevant and good for our students.
I spent some
Oh, sorry.
I spent some time in the world language department at South this week, and one of the things that was fascinating for me to see, I think I was in 6 different classrooms, and at least 4 of them, the teacher had a graphic organizer or even a handout for students that described the different levels of comprehension and skills that were needed. I remember in one class, they were getting ready for the holiday break and learning how to talk about going on vacation. And like the first level was, you need to be able to do 2 or 3 sentences about a vacation using either past tense or present tense. And the more advanced level was 4 or 5 sentences using at least 3 different tenses and how you did it. And the students knew that difference. It was posted on the wall, and the teacher was sort of playing out those differences there to get at these different skill levels. It was neat.
And the state requirements for world languages is changing.
So the fall of 28, it's on the books to be a 2-year graduation requirement for incoming freshmen the fall of 28. So those students that are starting that fall will start with that requirement, which is for the overwhelming majority of students. There are some exceptions that potentially could play out, but for most students, they would require 2 years of a language for high school graduation.
And then how many students in general take 4 years?
So that's something we'd have to look at. I know we
That's
were
coming.
we were doing some data examination that we're gonna look at with the chairs a little bit, so I don't have those numbers up top. We were looking at both the 2-year, so how many students are already would be meeting that graduation requirement? And then we're looking at that 4-year, but I don't have that off the
Okay.
top of my head, but we'll probably look at it early this spring semester.
It would be great if we could have some of that
Yeah,
information.
absolutely.
Because we have an overwhelming majority of our students across the district that matriculate into college, like 4-year
100%, yep.
programs. And oftentimes they require like 4 years. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
even if
We
it's
could-
only
yep.
2 years by the state, it would seem like our student population.
Correct. The overwhelming majority of our students are already meeting that 2-year requirement. We know this I think originally why you said, maybe world languages isn't really an elective. A lot of
It's kinda
schools
not
really consider
here.
it a core department,
Yeah.
because so many of their students take it already.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's on our list to build out some of that data to understand. And probably the easiest way to do that is to just look at a profile of a recent graduating class. Like, what percent of graduates take 4 years of a world language? I'm curious to know sort of what percent of kids take 4 years of a music course, because there's always, in every high school, there's a set of the music kids who want to do that. Some kids, do a lot of AP courses, some do a lot of science courses, just sort of understanding what the credit accumulation looks like for a graduating class and how that's distributed. It's on our list of things we need to make some sense out of and then describe to this group.
It's a little
Springtime
tricky
sometime.
too, because
Yeah.
like like a lot of our kids come in, especially from like 181, in Spanish 2 or maybe even Spanish 3. So then they're only taking a couple of classes because they will have met the 4-year requirement for college.
Because the colleges will accept that as long as it's that level of Spanish that they're getting, but they're not getting high school credit, right?
Correct,
So they
yes.
would only take 2 classes, they would get through Spanish 4, so they would meet the future graduation requirement for high school and meet the admission requirement,
Correct.
but would still have 2 years to either take a second language, perhaps, or really a third, maybe you might call it,
Yeah.
or take other
I
electives,
think my
right?
did that.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to look at social studies now, just so we understand, the department that I think we all recognize is probably the most different. So 22 courses offered district-wide, 100% of the ones that are offered at Central are currently running. At South, 17 courses offered and 14 of them are running this year. And here is, you'll see some of the differences. And some of these differences, again, they're largely historic ones. We know this is a department that isn't fully aligned yet, especially at that freshman level and some of our elective offerings. So you see some of those pop up here with the different courses at the top, African American History and American Diversity, just 2 different offerings at each campus. And then East Asian Studies is an offering here at Central that is not offered at South. And then you see kind of the opposite. You have a philosophy class that exists at one campus and not the other. The psychology courses that are not AP exist at South, not at Central. And then the World Studies Honors and World History Honors difference that we know we have at the freshman level. So you see kind of how that plays out in social studies, again, as another example. Is there any other department in particular? Remember, Acris, is there any other questions that we have or any department we want to look at specifically today?
Can we go back to the social studies?
Of course, yeah. The chart?
Yeah,
Yep.
Chris's colorful charts.
Yes.
The reasons that courses are not offered at either campus is historical, meaning there was not a lot of student interest or.
Well, even historical, I think how they were originally designed.
Okay.
Prior to the agreement that courses were going to be aligned, the courses just emerged differently in each school, which is not atypical, right? A lot of high school districts have operated that way, where a department gets interested in a particular course, they start it, it may not be district-wide. So that's been typical in a lot of high schools over the years, and those still exist more in social studies here than in our other departments.
And we're moving towards more alignment in social studies.
Yeah, I think it's on the roadmap to try to figure out what the best next steps are.
I think Member Akris charged us to come up with a plan for social studies sometime this spring. So we're trying to figure out, like, understand all the back and forth about alignment in social studies, and then figure out what the best path forward is. So
Can I look at the next slide again?
Sure. So this one is just a reminder for everybody, those last 3 rows are our freshman required courses.
I think that's an area of emphasis, especially the bottom 2 courses. One is only offered at Central, the other is offered at South.
Correct, and they're two
Right.
different offerings, right? And then
Right.
it's
Yeah.
even more interesting to me, this is one of the things that was most interesting to me, was that the standard level offering is the same, and then the honors offering is a little bit different, so,
And that was-
yeah, work that we know we have in front of us.
That was difference in departments by campus.
Correct.
And the courses.
Yeah, over time, that's just how it emerged at each campus.
But the 2 bottom courses, World History Honors and World Studies Honors, are completely different. It's not like a name difference.
Correct, they're different, they're
completely
fundamentally different courses. The World Studies Honors is more similar to the standard level course, the World Cultures course, where the World History Honors is more of a traditional history class. Whereas the World Cultures and World Studies are going to be a little bit more of a survey that's going to include more geographical and historical knowledge combined.
it's all on the list.
Other questions or thoughts on this one, or are we ready to move on to our third in the trilogy of presentations today?
Yep.
All right, great.
Thank you so much. This was, again, very helpful. No, I appreciate that. This was really, I can't tell you how happy I was to see, because I think, again, it gives us rapid representation. And I'm hoping that as we continue thinking about our pathway with alignment and course offerings, we'll continue to, I'm assuming this is a live document where we'll continue updating and keep this as a source for our community and ourselves.
Yeah, Member Akris, so what we'll do is, now that we have this established and we have a way that we know to collect this data and format it, we can continue. This is all these tables here are living in a spreadsheet, so we can continue to build on that year over year.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Ready to shift to the next presentation?
please.
Great. 1 second here, Ms. O'Keefe, and I'll tee it up here for you. So next, as mentioned previously, we have Ms. O'Keefe, our department chair for multilingual learning in the district. You know, as a board, we've talked a lot really over the last year or so about multilingual learning, so we thought it'd be nice to give a little bit bigger picture, some fundamental understanding of what those services include. It's really a spectrum of learning opportunities for our students. I also want to, before I turn it over to Ms. O'Keefe for the presentation, I just want to make sure everyone's clear, because there's a lot of different things regarding language that are offered in our schools, right? So we just talked about world languages. Those are those opportunities that are curricular opportunities for all students to choose. We have the seal of biliteracy for our students who are achieving biliteracy and want to test that and earn that seal, which is great. You also hear in other schools mentioned, which is a great option, particularly in elementary districts, some places, which is dual language. So that's a very different opportunity where it's either a one-way or two-way program where students are learning 2 languages all throughout school. This is very specifically multilingual programming. So traditionally, a lot of times it was referred to as EL or ESL. And we've kind of transitioned. You'll still see those terms used a little bit through the presentation because the state uses both. So for specific things, we'll still use EL or ESL, but we're often using the multilingual framing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. O'Keefe. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy, and I am a Hinsdale Central alum. So I graduated in 2006. I was a free sport athlete here. 15 years later, I'm back. So it's really nice. It's been full circle. So I started in education in the Teach for America program. I was placed in the Twin Cities teaching immigrants and refugees from Somalia. You'll see in that corner, that's my first class. Many of my students towered over me. It was wonderful, and I still think about them all the time. From there, so Somalia, I was teaching the Twin Cities, very kind of different, just to say the least. But I was really inspired by them, and I thought if I'm going to continue working, English as a second language, as it was called at that time, then I want to immerse myself in another culture so I can feel what it feels like to be them. So, as one does, I moved to Argentina. And so that picture down there is one of my classes where I taught actually in the middle of a farm in a little town called Vicuña Mackenna. It's about 8 hours from Buenos Aires, in the middle of a farm. And I taught at a little outdoor Catholic school, and it was wonderful. I lived with a family, and that continued to shape, really that I was meant to be working with students who speak English as a second, third, fourth language. And from there I moved back to Chicago. I worked at the Noble Schools in the city, one of my classes there. I worked as a 9th grade English teacher and ELL coordinator at the time, also teaching English as a second language. And then moved here to Hinsdale, so I'm also a community member. Have 2 little boys and a dog. And I will say, Friday the 13th, I was engaged, married, and closed on my house. So this just files as one of the top milestones, I guess, as well. As that's into an academic committee, number 4. So I'm
the most exciting thing after the Eras tour.
Exactly. So honestly, I never thought that I never pictured this being the full circle, but it really does, it feels home being here. And so I'm excited to be sharing all this multilingual learners information with you. So this is our just agenda. We'll walk through it all. So I'm going to just go over something that we did at our DIP Day last month or 2 months ago, whatever it was, that really roots itself in what it feels like to be a multilingual learner. So something that we did was, share with a partner something that you are looking forward to this weekend. You have 60 minutes. The caveat is that you can't use any words with the letter N. So you start there and you're like, okay, so wench, no, I can't say went. Went to a restaurant, no, I can't say that. So you really start thinking about, okay, you're really using your brain cognitively for a really simple concept. And so some of the emotions that sort of came up as we debriefed and did this was, you're fatigued, you're frustrated, you're burnt out, you're just trying to tell somebody that you went to the park this weekend, but you had to figure out how to do that. And so really the idea here is that, this was 1 minute for us as highly educated professionals, and our multilingual learners experience this 7 hours a day at school. And so really the idea is to just build that empathy and understanding that they are brilliant, and many of them are speaking their 4th language, 5th language. And so really to understand that it is an asset, and they are bringing so much to all of our classes.
Oh, I probably clicked off, I apologize. Try it now.
Okay, good. And so with that, our multilingual learners are navigating dual learning journeys. They're mastering academic content while simultaneously acquiring English language proficiency. On average, it takes 5 to 7 years to achieve academic language proficiency, but they are expected to master and really understand content immediately. And so really the success relies on tailored support, on scaffolding, dedicated staff, and equitable access to resources. So I get questions a lot of, how are multilingual learners identified? And it's through the Home Language Survey, which is a part of our Illinois Code. And these are the 2 questions. It's, is a language other than English spoken in the home? If so, which one? Does the student speak a language other than English? If so, which one? If either of those questions is yes, then they are required to take the WIDA, which is an overarching guidance that it's sort of like the College Board, but for multilingual learners. And so we give them a WIDA, the language screener, and it's on a scale of 1 to 6. So if the students score below a 5.0 on the screener, they are a part of our program. And then they continue to be in our program until they reach a score of a 4.8 on the annual access exam.
Carrie, how does student services, how does your area view MLL students?
We have a slide for that.
Thank you. I tend to get ahead of you guys, I'm sorry.
We can talk more about to our intersection and how we've been working with Tracy as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we have 166 multilingual students as of yesterday. We had a new student join us. There are 95 students at Central. There are 64 at South. There are 7 at the Transition Center. You will see these are all of the languages at each of the campuses, and I highlighted the common ones. So, yeah, you see, those are quite a few languages that we have in each of our buildings. And I have a handout if any of you guys want this.
To see the
Pass
ledger.
that down just so that you can see. This is just an overall generalization of each of the levels. So something to note, if we're looking from 1 to 6, that it really, level 1 is our newcomers. It's our brand new students who are learning English for the first time. We're starting really with like words and word chunks, lots of visuals and pictures. As it goes up to 2 to 3 to 4, we're going from words to understanding short phrases and sentences, to expanded sentences, to different sentence lengths, to complexity. And so our goal, obviously, is to get them to that reaching level. And so this is just so that you have an idea of what each of these levels needs. So again, with that, this is the scale. Entering level 1, beginning level 2, developing, expanding, and bridging, and then reaching means that they have reached really like native language proficiency.
So when is this WIDA test, I guess?
It's annually at the end of January, beginning of February is when we do it.
So then a student could be in the district for a full semester before they take the WIDA?
There's two, maybe talk about the screener versus the annual test.
So they, before they even register with their counselor, that home language survey, if it's yes to either of those questions, it's flagged for me to do their test. So that so there's a screener.
Okay.
And so then whatever they get on the screener, that indicates if they're in the program. So if we had a student who started yesterday, for example, I screened him last week, he has his score, he will also take the annual access test in February when you take it.
So if a student indicates that there is another language spoken at home or they speak another language at home, they are screened by the district before they even enter our brick and mortar as a student.
Correct.
So that
Part of the
we're-
registration.
So we can schedule them appropriately then.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you for asking.
And then if you're designated ML, there's an annual access testing.
Which would demonstrate growth.
Exactly.
Yep,
Okay.
and we will absolutely have students that'll answer yes to one or both of those questions, and we'll score, above the 5, and won't need services.
Yeah.
So that definitely happens on a consistent basis.
So if they score 1 through 4, they need services.
Yep.
5 or 6, they do not.
Exactly. Yep. All right.
If I may ask, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Are a lot of the students that are coming in, are these newcomers who have just transitioned? Or are these students who've had prior services from other school districts, incoming school districts?
That's a great question. It's really a combination. So we do have some transfer students who are coming in from other high school districts who are already considered an English language learner. In that case, I don't need to test them. because I already have their last year's access scores, they're already identified. All the students who are coming in who I am testing who are not transferring in from another school. They're here for the first time.
I think we,
And then, sorry, one more follow-up, I apologize. Are there any of the students that we're seeing that are coming in that have been part of multilingual programs in the feeder junior high schools?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We have a good amount of students who are coming in from the feeder schools.
I don't think that the, part of the data we looked at, I don't think it made the slides in the latest version, but help me if I'm right. At South, about half of our MLs have been identified as MLs in the sending districts. And about half were new arrivals to the district.
For Central.
Oh, that's for Central, and it's a third at South.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So I'm just gonna go over, there are two different program models. The first program model is called the Transitional Program of Instruction. And so this was our only model in District 86 until last school year. This is the model that you choose when you have 19 or fewer students of a single language. So up until last year, we had a variety of languages, but it was 19 or fewer students in each. And so for this, English as a second language services are required, which means that you have instruction in reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills in English. So that is explicitly taught in your English class, in addition to, the standards that the English classes are aligned to. This also means that the core subject areas, science, social studies, math, ELA, are aligned with the WIDA language proficiency standards, as well as the standards that all English and social studies, math, and science classes are aligned to within the district. So TBE, our Transitional Bilingual Education Program, is Spanish. And so this happened when the threshold poured over 20 last school year. And so this is, this can be for any. So at any point, if we have more students who speak a certain language, we would be required to do this. At this point, our model for TBE, Transitional Bilingual, is that we offer Spanish language arts for all of our native Spanish speakers. And so this means that they're also, they have their Spanish language arts, they're also enrolled in our ESL English classes, ML English, and also enrolled in core subject areas for social studies, science, and math. So they're in our specific multilingual sections of those courses. And really the benefit here is that if you're a native Spanish speaker, you are really strengthening your native literacy skills, and that transfers over into your English class and your other core content areas. And we are seeing a really good amount of growth, even just this being our second year of having Spanish language arts for our native Spanish speakers.
And the reason it's Spanish is because we had 20 or more students in that
39
language.
to 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Less than 20, then you have to deal with them individually. As soon as you get to 20, then you have to do specialized services for that language. That's the rule.
So then these are our tentative multilingual course offerings for next school year at each building. One of the things, just historically, is that we historically have had all of the students in D86, they have been serviced at Hinsdale Central. So up until this school year, all students within the district, South or Central, came over to Central. And so we currently still have 13 students in South District who are here. But this year, we started courses at South so that all incoming freshmen could attend Hinsdale South and still receive ESL services there. So that is why you'll see the difference in Central versus South, because we have 9th through 12th graders here, and and the course offerings there are for 9th and 10th graders. So these are our tentative course offerings, depending on numbers and whatnot that we get. But just so that you can see, these are our sections that we could potentially have for next school year.
What does multi-language, let's say algebra, look like?
Great question. So, Algebra 1 right now, so it's one of our core, it's one of our math teachers, and she's finished her ESL certification.
Okay.
So she's doing the same curriculum, but depending on the level of the student, she might incorporate like sentence starters, or for word problems, she might translate the directions for them. So there's different strategies that can be incorporated into the class.
So it's an ESL certification for the instructor,
Correct.
but it's not really an immersion program.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
But these are really tough classes to teach because that teacher's responsible to not only ensuring those students learn all the algebra, but also to help them learn to do algebra in English. So it's, there's a lot more learning that has to happen there, and thus a lot more skill in those ways. What happens when a teacher doesn't have the ESL endorsement? How do we set that up?
So, great question. We as a district have allotted a portion of our professional development money through Jason each year to have certain teachers get their ESL certification. So I'll talk about that in a slide or two, I believe.
And the other alternative is, if that can't happen, we use the co-teaching model. So we have a math teacher who doesn't have the ESL endorsement, and they're in the room at the same time with a EL certified teacher, maybe who doesn't have the math background here. So the two individuals in the room are servicing students, but because the math teacher or the content specialist doesn't have the ESL endorsement, we provide that co-teaching until that can be met.
So this can affect staffing then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Frequently.
And that's, again, one of the primary reasons why we're really, obviously, we want to serve our students the best way possible, so we want to make sure there's an endorsed person in the room, so we
Right.
co-teach when necessary. But clearly, it's much better to have that endorsed person to be a content area expert and be the same person. So
Right.
that's what we're trying to get to. We're getting closer, and we're making progress, and thankfully, our teachers are really committed to it. We just got to continue to support them. So I imagine in the next year or two, we'll be there where we'll be able to fill the overwhelming majority of our classes.
So in terms of the teachers, can the if a teacher has the ESL certification, it doesn't have to be by content area, it's just an ESL certification?
It's on top of their license, so whatever. Yep, if
Okay.
I'm a social studies teacher, I can get that, just like if I'm a math teacher. So you have your main content area, and then that endorsement kind of sits on top of that.
So they can co-teach in any subject area?
Mhm.
So is that my question, maybe it's an HR question or HR committee question?
Feel free.
Are the teachers able to go on overload then and do the co-taught piece?
We would only, that would still be part of their regular assignment. So the teachers that we have co-teaching, that's one of their 5 classes, because they're an integral part of that class. That's a full class that they're teaching. We just have 2 teachers assigned to that course. So yeah, we wouldn't assign that as an additional duty for someone as like a 6th assignment. Obviously, unless we needed to, for like it was a late ad and we couldn't hire for that,
Yeah.
maybe it would be an overload. But when we know and we're scheduling for it, it would be one of their 5 assignments. Just like co-teaching with special education, it's the same way.
And we're thinking we have enough staff?
Well, we have that situation now. We're actually doing, we're doing less of the co-teaching now than we were 2 years ago. And
Okay.
each year, we're getting more and more endorsed teachers. Sorry, Tracy,
That's
back to you.
okay. Well, this
Perfect
just
segue.
It is.
tease me up. So 22-23, there were 11 ESL endorsed teachers in the district. 4 of those actually were there was a dean, a social worker, transition center, and librarian. So there weren't a lot of ESL endorsed staff a couple years ago. This year we doubled that, so we have 22 endorsed teachers. So we're making progress in each of our departments. And we are set right now for next school year to have 30 endorsed teachers. So we have a good amount of teachers who are going through our program that we've partnered with the Illinois Resource Center, who partners with National Louis to get our teachers endorsed. With that, there are a certain amount of challenges that we are seeing with credentials. Science, both Central and South. You know, with our endorsement program, it's people who want it. So we're not telling people that they have to get it. It's, you know, we're gonna pay for your certification. And so we're struggling to get teachers in science at the moment. We don't have anybody for health at South, and then social studies at South. So those are just current challenges where we're at right now.
And remember, the South program, right, we're just bringing it to South, so it makes sense that we don't have as many endorsed
Yeah.
teachers there, they weren't hiring for it in the past. So that's something now that we know, as we hire new teachers and our current teachers, we're getting endorsed.
I have a question, Jason. In terms of these challenges, by department, how many are experiencing a lot of educators that are retiring, right? So we're
Yep.
gonna have incoming, I think, social studies.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, this year in social studies at both campuses,
Both
we have
campuses,
hires.
Quite a few,
Five
right?
between the buildings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're at Central this year, and then science.
Next year, or science, yeah, we'll have next year.
Yep.
As well as social studies again.
So we'll be looking for maybe people with the
Absolutely.
ESL certification
Yep.
already,
Mhm.
okay.
We're having that conversation with them as they come in.
Yeah.
And, that's an expectation that we certainly have, is that we wanna build this, so looking for that mindset in our candidates
Yeah.
and the willingness.
Because our MLL, you've been talking about this, Jason, for the last 2 years, the
Yep.
population that just continues to grow.
Absolutely.
But the South, the health teachers are PE teachers, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, typically, occasionally you'll get a health teacher that's maybe a science teacher, but most typically
I'm
it's.
sorry.
No, you're like, going on to the next slide. It means we did it in the right order.
Yeah.
So we have grown quite a bit. You know, since 2020, we've doubled exactly, 83 in 2020, and we have 166 as of yesterday. So, yeah, and so then that just kind of shows you too, this is where our FTE has been historically for our program.
But
as
this,
well.
we need to point out, this is different because MLL was only at Central.
Correct. Yep,
So
that's
this
why
is
you see
gonna
it.
grow. Yeah.
Correct, it'll balance
Well,
out
it'll
over
balance,
time,
yeah.
so, yep.
And I think something interesting to point out is while the students have doubled, our staffing hasn't necessarily doubled because as we've added more endorsed teachers, we didn't need to continually co-taught all of our classes. So early on, there was a heavy co-teaching need at the 2.4 in 2020. But as we've gotten more endorsed, we're continuing to offering services to more students, but we don't need a 0.4 for every period, we only need a 0.2.
Okay.
That's a great point.
And then just another part of our department is that I run the Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee, which we're actually meeting today. And this is a state mandated advisory committee that represents parents of our multilingual students. Just some of the things that we do, aside from really, like, I think one of the most special parts of it is that I have parents who come in and they're speaking 5, 6 different languages. And I try to get them to interact with each other, and really they're bonding because many of them, this is, you know, their first or second year here, and either in the district or like in the States, and they have a lot of things in common. And so just our last BPAC meeting, which was in this room, we had a parent from Ukraine and a parent from China who just were staying and talking, and they were both speaking English, you know, as a 3rd or 4th language, just talking about their experience and how happy that they're here. And so, you know, aside from what we are required to do by the state, I really enjoy interacting with the parents, and, you know, it's a wonderful opportunity to hear, you know, what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing, how can I help them, how can we help them have more of a voice in the district to feel that they can advocate and whatnot. And so it's really wonderful. In addition to, you know, participating in planning and operating of our programming, and doing some of our evidence-based spending and whatnot, that there are requirements, and then there's the joy that comes with really getting to know people and their stories.
Do you have a high participation rate of parents?
It's increasing, I would say. You know, I try to make it really engaging, and so to have them bring, like last time, people brought a food that they wanted to share with each other, and so it was kind of cool to hear what they brought and why. And so, yeah, like last meeting we had about 8 parents come, which was higher than the previous year, which was like 2. And so we're still figuring it out. Yeah.
And you vary your schedule based on times of day to
Exactly.
accommodate different working schedules. So we have some in the evening, some during the day,
Yep.
morning.
Yeah, and so, yeah, today's is during the day, and I think there've been 8 or 9 parents who RSVP'd, and it was the same thing. Our last one was, we did it right before conferences, so, or in between the conference time, so it was like 4:30 to 5:30, so a good amount of parents were able to come in and then go to parent conferences.
It's a high percentage.
It is, out of 116,
Yeah.
150 some students district-wide, it is.
Yeah.
I do send the emails out in every language, so they're able to access it. And then, so just closing, as a district, we are continuing to examine our best practices. We are currently working with the state to ensure that we do deliver the best program possible for our students. The full programming at both campuses is targeted for completion by 27-28 school year, so we'll continue to bring in our incoming 9th grade classes from all of the feeder schools, so that they can attend Central or South. And then the goal is to offer the courses for all of those grade levels by that school year. We are gonna continue to prioritize multilingual staff endorsements and continue to have those hiring practices to prioritize incoming teachers with their endorsements, and then develop capacity to understand the outcomes and set appropriate learning goals for all of our students. And that's all I got.
I just want to, question, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Smith, please,
Yeah, we
go
were
ahead.
just gonna circle back to
Yeah.
our intersection between students who are multilingual and students with IEPs. So Tracy attends our student services cabinet, which meets once a month and provides updates for us, also shares any programming, any things we need to consider. We've been supporting our audit that's coming up with ISB by sharing the necessary information that is required to share with regard to how we're communicating with students with IEPs. And then also we have, because we noticed that we were also increasing in terms of our students with IEPs who are multilingual, we definitely at South, we have a teacher who is endorsed, EL endorsed, and is a special education teacher. So one of our strategies resource support courses is there are students who are multilingual, who are placed within that specific strategies course to be able to meet their multilingual needs as well as their needs for an IEP. So those are just some of the things that
We have it at Central too.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I just noticed more, when we recently started one at South, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And could you maybe talk about this a little bit? And correct me if I'm wrong. It's my understanding that the rate of students with IEPs is higher among our ML students than among the rest of the population. Is that right? So, like, these are students who not only have to do language acquisition and learn content, but there's a higher proportion of them who have special needs.
Well, and I think the other piece, though, we have to just make sure that we're understanding is that we are making sure prior to identifying a student as having a disability who is multilingual, there are some things we have to do. So, for example, if it's appropriate, we need to make sure that they are tested in their primary language so that we're not over-identifying
Right,
students. So I
right,
don't want it
right.
to seem like we're over-identifying. We are taking those steps to make sure that when we are identifying students who are multilingual with a disability and in need of an IEP, that we are cognizant that the language is not the reason that we are seeing that impact on their education.
And that's an issue really across the country. That specific issue of, it's referred to as dual identification, with both multilingual services being in need and then special education. And that really is challenging to tease apart. We think about it at the high school level because that's what we serve, but most often this identification is happening much earlier in their career, assuming they come to the United States or starting a program earlier. So that it's really difficult to tease that apart. And actually the professional development that 4 of us are attending, the leader of that is one of the experts in this area. She has a book published in this exact area of dual identification. So we're really trying to understand those best practices, and Dr. Smith, I know, will continue to lead us to really kind of see how we can best serve our students. Great, I think Member Ackers might have had a question.
I do want to pipe in there, yeah, thank you so much.
Yes.
There's two things I wanted to just highlight, and I appreciate you, Jason, and then our presenter, talking about like just the nuances of how many students across our nation, and this really pulls at my heartstring, that again ends up identified as IEPs only because of a multilingual, because they're multilingual. So I appreciate the leadership that we're gonna continue following through and teasing those two things out, especially in those students who are coming in and come in identified from other districts where they could have been misidentified. So I appreciate all the hard work. The other suggestion I wanted to bring in is I always find it interesting that we just talked about world language programs, and then here we're talking about multilingual learners, to really think outside the box a little bit creatively of how we can leverage those two populations and support each other. I find it funny, like we talk about world language students who are trying to learn another language, and then we have multilingual learners who are immersed in their own language, and to think about what ways can we leverage those two and support each other. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Member Ackers, thank you for mentioning that, and I think it's been a big message that we've talked about. I really appreciate the board's support and Tracy's leadership about really taking this asset-based approach when we talk about all of our students, certainly, and specifically our multilingual students. I mean, some of the opportunities that these students will have for themselves, but then will create for their peers, particularly when we think about like those world language classes. I mean, we've talked a lot about our Spanish speakers. For instance, if they could be in an AP Spanish literature class as a freshman or a sophomore, if they're an ML student and that's their first language, and they could be really helping our students that are seniors here, where Spanish is a second language they're trying to gain fluency. I mean, those are really great experiences that I think Member Ackers is referring to, and it goes far beyond that in all of our classes, but just great opportunities that we have in front of us at both campuses now.
And one thing that we started last year that we will continue this year is we started doing conversation partners. So I worked with Dr. Biddix and then the World Language Department chairs to identify students in Spanish 4 and up who had the same lunch periods as our multilingual students. And twice a week they would sit together and practice either English or Spanish. And so we were able to do that with our Spanish speaking students. And so yeah, we'll continue to do that.
I think that piece right there is lovely. And it's actually quite innovative, and it might be something that we would wanna talk to the state about.
Yeah.
And let them know what we're doing.
Absolutely.
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Great, any other questions on that? All right, very good, thank you, appreciate it. All right.
All right, so does anybody have anything they'd like to add? No? So if there's no additional discussion, the academic committee meeting is adjourned at 8:31. Thank you so much.